Joining me now is our panel, Peter Nicholas, NBC News senior White House reporter, Idris Calhoun, staff writer at The Atlantic, Megan Hayes, former special assistant to President Biden, and Republican strategist Mark Bednar. Thank you to all of you for being here. We have a jam-packed potpourri of topics to discuss. Peter, let me start with you, though, because talk about the disparity in what we just saw. And is that creating a new political challenge for Democrats right now?
Well, I think that's true. And I think you touched on the important point here, which is the message that Jill Biden delivered during the campaign was that Joe was fit, Joe was able. And then she admits in this book that's now going on sale that she had great concerns about his health to the point where she was worried he was having a stroke. Well, I think, and we'll get into this a little later in the show when I talk about my trip to Iowa, but there's a lot of concerns about the authenticity of politicians. And I think this is what voters don't like. That this is what voters don't like. And this is kind of what they like about Trump. Whatever other issues they may have with him, they like the fact that he sounds like he is being real, that he's being genuine. And I think that what's happening with these revelations in Jill Biden's book, it's reminding a lot of voters what they don't like about prototypical politicians.
We are going to delve into everything you learned in Iowa. Just let me turn to you, though. What are you hearing in terms of reaction to these new revelations by the former First Lady? And again, that stark disparity between what she said in the moments after the debate and what she was clearly thinking in her mind at the time.
Well, I think for a lot of them, it's revisiting a chapter that they didn't want to open again, right? Again, that's what's going to sell the books. But, you know, the DNC autopsy doesn't really touch on this issue. Democrats really want to move past the Biden years. They don't talk about it. They don't say that was a golden age. And so I think for them, it's just bringing back a lot of bad memories. And I think it was obvious to people with eyes and ears that something was wrong. And so the Democratic campaign and their efforts to say that, no, everything is fine, it just reminds people again that the party was not credible at the time. And people who are associated with Biden, like Pete Buttigieg, et cetera, I think they've seen their stars fallen a bit because of this.
Megan, weigh in on that. What are the implications of the former First Lady speaking out right now?
Well, first, I just want to address, she's a spouse in this, right? So she's not a politician. She's not an elected. She is trying to sell books, and I appreciate that. I think the stark difference here that people are talking about what she said immediately after, that is to rally the troops. I don't think anybody at the moment realized how bad this was going to land in the direct aftermath, right? They went from the stage to this event. So I respect that she did pump up the troops in that moment there, but I also think that you're 100% right here. Nobody wants to be reminded of this. This was not a good moment for us. Joe Biden should have never decided to run for president. I think that is very clear to everyone. But Democrats do need to move past this, and I think that we need to start questioning politicians' health and their age. And this is a real question that we need to have. We saw it with Joe Biden. We're seeing it now with Donald Trump. We've seen people pass away in Congress. We saw someone missing for 6 months because they're in a memory care facility. This is an actual problem we have in our country, and we have politicians that are too old to be in office, and we need to take it seriously.
Mark, does it shine a light on President Trump's age and health? He's nearly 80 years old. He was just at Walter Reed. I think folks are still anticipating asking for reporters like Peter trying to get the results of this latest visit to the doctor?
Well, first of all, the more salient book, other than Jill Biden's book, is your NBC colleague, Jonathan Allen. In his book, Fight, it's pretty clear that the largest driving factor for Joe Biden to either run for re-election, then also to stay in after the debate, was Joe Biden. So for all these revelations that come out now is, pretty interesting. I think it says more about her and kind of the climate around the Biden White House at the time. That being said, that has kind of laid a soil that the American public is skeptical of politicians and their ages. And so for the fact that for President Trump to be out there, sparring with the press almost daily, to be giving the longest State of the Union in American history, to be actively engaged, I personally think he needs to do more rallies, get out there before the midterms. But in terms of transparency for healthcare, that only serves the American public.
Yeah, Peter, pick up on that point. I mean, based on your conversations with your sources inside the administration, are they planning to release more information about this latest visit to the hospital?
Well, I think it remains to be seen, but I do think that there's an expectation that presidents should release this material, and Trump has done so in the past. Barack Obama did. You've covered these White Houses. Joe Biden has done it. And the fact that Trump is pushing 80 And there's been some attention to bruises on his hands, and where there's been some concern that he might be dozing off in meetings. I think that it becomes incumbent on him to be more transparent and to reveal to Americans, exactly what his health is like, and especially since he made an issue of Joe Biden's health.
Yeah, and there's a lot of scrutiny on the younger generation of politics, and today a revelation from one of the politicians who's getting a lot of focus about a potential run in 2028, Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan, though, saying she's not going to run. Take a look at what she had to say.
There's time until 2028, yes?
Of course there's time. I think there will be a robust group of people running for president. I will not be one of them in 2028, I can tell you that.
That's a pretty firm statement, Idris. I mean, we're always looking for a little bit of nuance there, but in this case, she says she's out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's interesting to see what's happened there. I mean, since Trump was reelected, her position as a kind of resistance governor has kind of gone down. She's made more attempts at conciliation with the administration. And some people think that the attempt to kidnap her that failed, that the FBI disrupted, that really shook her. And I think that might be playing into her calculation as well.
Megan, what do you make of her saying that she's not planning to run? I mean, she was one of the people who was getting a lot of attention as a potential.
I mean, she was one of Joe
candidate.
Biden's final. He picked Kamala Harris. It was like down to the two of them. She would have been a great vice president as well. So it's really upsetting that she doesn't want to run, or at least put her hat in the ring, or put herself in the ring. But I think maybe this is for the future. She might choose to run again, or maybe she would be a great VP pick or a cabinet pick. So I hope she's not completely out of politics. But I do think you're right. I don't think her family wanted to be doing this anymore. It's really taxing on people's family and the amount of scrutiny. She's a great moderate governor, and she would have been a really formidable candidate. So it's disappointing to see, but I assure you there will be 20 plus people.
I have no fact check true, Megan. On that note, I do want to turn to your trip to Iowa. Peter, what were your big takeaways? You were there. You were talking to voters. There's a potentially competitive Senate race there. What did you hear? What did you learn?
So we spoke to more than a dozen farmers in Iowa, and their policies, their livelihoods are in jeopardy in many ways. The family farm is under threat. Cost of diesel fuel and fertilizer has been going up because of the Iran war. These were people who largely voted for Donald Trump, and by and large, they still like him. And that was what was interesting to me. I asked them why. I mean, they described eloquently how their farms are struggling, and they're not certain they'll be able to pass them on to future generations. But they said they like his candor. They like the fact that he talks bluntly, and they're not necessarily holding it against him. They're not taking offense personally that some of his policies may be making their lives, maybe creating headwinds for them. For example, tariffs on China have resulted in a downturn in agricultural sales to that country. But the farmers are largely still sticking with him and hoping that in the end he'll have some solutions. It gets back to what I was saying earlier, though. There's an emotional bond that he has with his voters, with his base, that is actually beyond policy. It's almost beyond reason. They just like him. And they are pretty wary of all politicians, but they like this one.
It's just fascinating, your conversations, Peter. Mark, respond to what Peter is saying, and how does it play in the midterms? Because Peter's point is, look, if you are a hardcore Trump supporter, you're going to stand with him even if your own prices are going up, even if your farming business is struggling. And yet, in order to win in some of these battleground states, you got to win over independents. You have to win over some moderate Republicans in these general elections.
Absolutely. And that couples with both kind of on the policy side that Peter's getting to, but then also kind of the political coalition. So first and foremost, in Peter's piece, it was really illuminating that a lot of these farmers said that their problems were multi-generational, multi-decade. And so for President Trump to finally try to engage China, try to crack that code, we're not there yet, but he's made a lot of progress. So that's really important. And furthermore, that underscores why a peaceful resolution that President Trump can get a W with the Iranian situation, that's really important. We've seen that not only with gas, but also with fertilizer. Of course, we know that he's working towards that right now, as your reporting indicated earlier, but we're going to have to see where that goes. But lastly, in terms of winning over those independents and also
Yeah.
part of some of the Democrats that have been in the Trump coalition, he is not on the ballot. And so we cannot take those voters for granted, and that requires congressional candidates on the Republican side and the Senate side. Ashley Hinson's going to be a great senator, but for them to go out and actually engage these voters, because you can't take them for granted that they're going to show up again.
Megan, your reaction to that and to this core finding that Peter has, which is what it's about for voters is authenticity. That's one of the big takeaways from the Trump era.
Yeah, absolutely. Authenticity is always going to turn out your base, but that's
Yeah.
not going to turn out independents, and it's not going to turn out moderate Republicans. And so that's where these midterms, and Trump's not on the ballot for the midterms. So not only is there a Senate race, there's a governor's race in Iowa that the DGA feels, the Democratic Governors Association feels pretty confident that they can win, which would be huge. So now you have a lot of governors in play and a lot of senators in play that were not in play before, which is it's really going to shake the base, and it's really going to change people's visions going into 28. But I stand firm. Democrats need to talk about the economy and only talk about solutions, and they should not be talking about anything else, because that is how you are going to turn out these independents and moderate Republicans to actually switch to be Democrats and leave the coalition, the Trump coalition.
Idris, final point to you, and you can even weigh in on Texas as a way to talk about the framing of this, the challenge of winning over those independent voters, the Senator Cornyn voters, who it's all going to come down to in Texas, for example.
Yeah, it's people think that prices here or a new program there will change people's minds, but people's preferences are really baked in, and it's very, very hard to change them, even when livelihoods are threatened. Like, people's political views are just very, very hard to change.
All right, guys, great conversation. Peter, thanks for bringing us your reporting from Iowa. We really appreciate it. Peter, Idris, and Megan. Mark, great conversation.